Tacoma. Welcome back to your TV classroom. We're so happy to have another special guest join us. Before we get started with that, as always, let's take a moment to check in with your zones. Think about what emotion you're feeling. Think about why you're feeling that way. Remember your iMessage. I feel because
Miss Oslin?
Yes.
Today my brain is feeling a little slow.
Oh.
Because once again, friends, at 4 o'clock this morning, guess who woke up? Oliver woke up. And so my brain is feeling tired. So I think I'm in the blue zone today.
I'm in the yellow zone today because I'm kind of worried because yesterday the water heater in my basement started leaking.
Oh no.
So there was water everywhere. I had to wash my hair with cold water, and I'm worried about how much it's going to cost to replace it. So I'm in the yellow zone. Lieutenant Aguirre, how are you feeling today?
I'm actually in the green zone. I'm really excited to be here.
Wonderful.
To talk about what I do. So I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, well then let's get started.
Let's do it.
Today we have with us Lieutenant Gretchen Aguirre with the Tacoma Police Department. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We're excited to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start just by telling our students at home what it is you do for Tacoma.
Well, right now I actually work as a lieutenant, and I do a little bit more work in the office right now. I'm what's called a community services lieutenant. And I work with people that are experiencing homelessness, and I work with people that maybe have some unhappy feelings and mental illness. But I've actually worked in quite a few areas in the department. I've worked as a detective, so I worked in the investigative unit. I've also worked in special investigations, which actually does cases involving narcotics or drugs. I've worked in patrol. So I've also been a sergeant in patrol. So I supervised other patrol officers. I've also been, some funny ones, like a public information officer. So I would talk to the public about what the police do. I've even trained other officers, and just a little bit of everything.
Even though you're no longer on patrol, I see you still have a lot of equipment. Can you tell us about what everything is and what its purpose is?
So yes, we actually have, so just so you know, when I actually had all my equipment on, I weighed another 35 pounds.
Wow. So friends, 35 pounds. Pebble, that's a lot of you.
It would be maybe like 2 big pumpkins at Halloween, carrying those around all the time. So it's a lot. But basically, everybody has a lot of the same things, no matter where you work. It might change a little bit depending on what division you're in. But we have our radio, and this is our lifeline. This is kind of like our telephone. So the dispatcher will call us and tell us what calls we need to go to on the radio. Or if we have a question or we want to talk to the dispatcher, we click our radio and we talk to them. Let's see, we have other things. We have handcuffs that are here. So sometimes just to kind of help us keep people calm, we will use the handcuffs. We have different kinds that we can use. So I don't know if you can see these here. We have a little key that we use. We have some other things I don't have on here, but we do have, I don't know if you can see here. This is a holder for what's called a taser, which some of you see on TV. It is an extra tool for us, and basically that kind of helps people stay in place. So to protect us and to protect them from hurting themselves sometimes. And then, of course, let's see, we have sometimes we'll use this, which is it expands. And the purpose of this is actually sometimes to get into cars, like if we have to break a window and get into. It can be used for other things, but this is a real tool that we use also. And then, of course, everybody knows, let's see. Well, we have a flashlight, so we can see when it gets dark. It's pretty bright flashlight. You got to have that with you all the time. And then also, everybody knows, of course, we do have a handgun that we wear and we use as a tool. And then right here are the magazines that we put in the handgun when we use it. And so 2 things I should tell you. First off is I think my biggest tool that I haven't mentioned is my mouth, because that's a great tool to have in ways that we can talk to people and find out how they're dealing with what's going on in their lives and see how we can work that with them to solve problems.
I bet you probably check in with their feelings.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when we go, it's difficult because most people's feelings are pretty strong at that time. They're either very upset or very angry or maybe very sad. So it takes a lot of work to really talk to people and figure out how you can help them solve problems. So sometimes they're not very happy about the outcome, but that's kind of what we do, is we're big problem solvers. And I think the other thing you should know is with the firearm, I always want to be very careful and tell you with a gun that you never want to play with a gun. And do you know what you do when you find a gun? Have you talked about that?
We have not.
So if you find a gun, you want to make sure and let your parents know, or you let an adult know. You never want to touch it.
Yep.
And then you can make decisions after that, after you tell an adult. So it's important to know.
That is important.
That's important. It keeps everybody safe.
Yep.
I'm wondering about, you mentioned your radio and you would get calls from dispatch. So I'm wondering if you could explain to students when they would call for help, call 911, and what they could expect after that.
So when you call 911, it's usually in an emergency. I always say that when I say an emergency, that would be if you saw something bad happen that you think would be an emergency, or something maybe bad happened to you, or if, let's say, you saw a fire or something like that, then you would call. And when you call the dispatcher, they're going to ask you a lot of questions. So you have to be very patient with them. You want to let them know that you're calling and why you're calling. They'll ask you your name and your phone number, your address. So you want to make sure you practice those. And really just sometimes they'll ask you questions about, can you tell me what's going on or what it looks like? And can you maybe describe a person that's involved? Like, what clothes are they wearing? Their hat, or how old they are, or maybe even their shoes. But that's the most important thing. And if for some reason you accidentally call 911, you also just need to let somebody know. Sometimes that does happen. You just want to say that it's a mistake. But it's important to know that you use it for emergencies and very serious situations. So you don't want to call 911 and ask what the weather is like. That's not a good example of calling 911. So, yeah.
Oh, I hear Mabel has a question. Mabel, what's your question? Oh, okay. So Mabel wants to know if police officers are only when there's an emergency, or are there other things that police officers do?
Yes.
Or
so that actually is a really good question. So police officers are actually people too. And I think that's the most important thing to remember. We have families, and we have kids that we have to take care of, and we have emotions too. And so I think it's important to talk to police officers and ask any questions that you might have. Unfortunately, like I mentioned, a lot of times we show up and people are not very happy, and they're very upset. And sometimes children even see police things, or may be there when the police show up. So if we can meet people outside, and we have a group of officers called community liaison officers, and we also have a youth cadre, and so they go out and interact with the community and try and teach people about what officers do, and educate and answer questions. And so we really try and do that to get people to know us and talk to us rather than just driving around in our car. And I think for me, even just not as much in COVID, but even just last year, I would get out of my car and I would walk in my neighborhood and I would say hello to people. I would walk in the park. And I just think it's really great if we do that, so we can meet people and actually talk to them. Let us know what questions they have and how we can help.
So Gus is wondering.
Ooh.
Oh, that's a good question. So Gus is saying, so if I see a police officer, it's okay to go up and say hi, and like you said, ask questions?
Yep, definitely.
Wow.
Yeah, I think the more you know about us and what we do, then it kind of helps. There's a lot of people watch TV, and that's kind of what they see. Oh, this is what the police do on TV, and there's a lot of thinks that we always make arrests and stuff like that, but actually we don't. A lot of what we do is talk to people and try and solve problems, and it can take a lot of patience. So yeah, definitely.
Are there any other questions from our buddies over there? Coming up. Oh, Rashid. So Rashid is wondering about canine police officers or dogs.
Right. We have those too.
I've seen those before.
Yeah.
So we actually have different types of canines.
Oh.
We have one dog that actually will look for drugs and works their reward is a ball. They love a ball, most of them. And they sniff around vehicles and sometimes around people and see, because sometimes the drugs are hidden in the vehicle. So that's one type. The other type we have is called a generalist canine. And that canine actually works with patrol officers. And so one thing that you should know about dogs is, so your sense of smell as a person, if you looked at it, would be about the size of a postage stamp. But a sense of smell for a dog is about the size of one of those big black trash cans.
Oh, wow.
That's how much they can smell. And they smell the skin that comes off your body, they can smell. And so we use the generalist a lot of times to search for things. He can be on a leash or off a leash, but he can search in the woods for things. And then sometimes we do use them for other uses. Sometimes just even to show people that we have a dog. Sometimes that makes people say, oh, okay, I understand. But a lot of it is looking for things or following to tracking. So they're really useful tools that we have. That's another tool that the police department uses.
Wow. I didn't think about the canines being used as a tool, but yeah, it's a great explanation. Are there any other questions that come up from working in the community that you think our students would also be wondering?
Yes, I think one that actually, so I've been with the police department for 24 years, and one that I get a lot is actually about my size, because I'm not very big. I'm small and short, and I'm a girl. And so a lot of times people have questions about, well, how did you work in the police department? And I would get jokes about if I rode around in my patrol car on a telephone book so I could see. So what I say to that is that each person brings special skills to their job. They have special gifts that they use. And my parents say I have the gift of gab. I can talk a lot. So what I had to do is learn how to talk to people even more so because of my size. There are still people that would hurt me. So I have to be careful of that. But I think the biggest part that I used was to show people, look, as I think about things maybe differently than other people do. And I respond a little differently than other people do. So I think just having a different look and a different take on the policing is really helpful. And I feel like I've been very fortunate and I've loved working in police work. So
well, we appreciate everything that you do to help keep us safe
definitely.
and educate us. So you have a book that you're going to read.
I do.
Chrysanthemum by Kevin Henkes. All right. So I'm going to step away so you can take your mask off.
Okay.
And Mrs. Wally will run the PowerPoint.
Sounds great.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to start with Chrysanthemum, and I'm going to have to put my glasses on. So my eyes are getting old. The day she was born was the happiest day in her parents' lives. She's perfect, said her mother. Absolutely, said her father. And she was absolutely perfect. Her name must be everything she is, said her mother. Her name must be absolutely perfect, said her father. And it was. Chrysanthemum. Her parents named her Chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum grew and grew and grew. And when she was old enough to appreciate it, Chrysanthemum loved her name. She loved the way it sounded when her mother woke her up. She loved the way it sounded when her father called her for dinner. And she loved the way it sounded when she whispered it to herself in the bathroom mirror. Chrysanthemum, Chrysanthemum, Chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum loved the way her name looked when it was written with ink on an envelope. She loved the way it looked when it was written with icing on her birthday cake. Yum. and she loved the way it looked when she wrote it herself with her fat orange crayon. Chrysanthemum, Chrysanthemum, Chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum thought her name was absolutely perfect, and then she started school. On the first day, Chrysanthemum wore her sunniest dress and her brightest smile. She ran all the way. "Hooray," said Chrysanthemum. "School." But when Miss Chud took roll call, everyone giggled upon hearing Chrysanthemum's name. "It's so long," said Joe. "It scarcely fits on your name tag," said Rita, pointing. "I'm named after my grandmother," said Victoria. "You're named after a flower." Chrysanthemum wilted. She did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She thought it was absolutely dreadful. The rest of the day was not much better. During nap time, Victoria raised her hand and informed Miss Chud that the chrysanthemum's name was spelled with 13 letters. That's exactly half as many letters as there are in the entire alphabet, Victoria explained. "Thank you for sharing with us, Victoria," said Miss Chud. "Now put your head down." "If I had a name like yours, I'd change it," Victoria said, as the students lined up to go home. "I wish I could," thought Chrysanthemum miserably. "Welcome home," said her mother. "Welcome home," said her father. "School is no place for me," said Chrysanthemum. "My name is too long. It scarcely fits on my name tag, and I'm named after a flower." "Oh, pish," said her mother. "Your name is beautiful and precious and priceless and fascinating and winsome," said her father. "It's everything you are," said her mother. "Absolutely perfect," said her father. Chrysanthemum felt much better after her favorite dinner, macaroni and cheese with ketchup, ooh, and an evening filled with hugs and kisses and parcheesi. That night, Chrysanthemum dreamed that her name was Jane. It was an extremely pleasant dream. The next morning, Chrysanthemum wore her most comfortable jumper. She walked to school as slowly as she could. She dragged her feet in the dirt. "Chrysanthemum, Chrysanthemum, Chrysanthemum," she wrote. "She even looks like a flower," said Victoria, as Chrysanthemum entered the playground. "Let's pick her," said Rita, pointing. "Let's smell her," said Joe. Chrysanthemum wilted. She did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She thought it was absolutely dreadful. The rest of the day was not much better. During nap time, Victoria raised her hand and said, "A chrysanthemum is a flower. It lives in our garden with worms and other dirty things." "Thank you for sharing with us, Victoria," said Miss Chud. "Now put your head down." "I just cannot believe your name," Victoria said as the students lined up to go home. "Neither can I," thought Chrysanthemum miserably. "Welcome home," said Mother. "Welcome home," said her father. "School is no place for me," said Chrysanthemum. "They said I even looked like a flower. They pretended to pick and smell me." "Oh, pish," said her mother. "They're just jealous and envious and begrudging and discontented and jaundiced," said her father. "Who wouldn't be jealous of a name like yours?" said her mother. "After all, it's absolutely perfect," said her father. Chrysanthemum felt a trifle better after her favorite dessert, chocolate cake with buttercream frosting. And another evening filled with hugs and kisses and parcheesi. That night, Chrysanthemum dreamed that she really was a chrysanthemum. She sprouted leaves and petals. Victoria picked her and plucked the leaves and petals one by one until there was nothing left but a scrawny stem. It was the worst nightmare of Chrysanthemum's life. Chrysanthemum wore her outfit with 7 pockets the next morning. She loaded the pockets with her most prized possessions and her good luck charms. Chrysanthemum took the longest route possible to school. She stopped and stared at each and every flower. "Chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum," the flowers seemed to say. That morning, the students were introduced to Mrs. Twinkle, the music teacher. Her voice was like something out of a dream, as was everything else about her. The students were speechless. They thought Miss Twinkle was an indescribable wonder. They went out of their way to make a nice impression. Miss Twinkle led the students in scales. Then she assigned roles for the class musical. Victoria was chosen as the dainty fairy queen. Rita was chosen as the spiffy butterfly princess. Joe was chosen as the all-important pixie messenger. And Chrysanthemum was chosen as a daisy. Chrysanthemum's a daisy, chrysanthemum's a daisy. Joe, Rita, and Victoria chanted, thinking it was wildly funny. Chrysanthemum wilted. She did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She thought it was absolutely dreadful. What's so humorous? Asked Miss Twinkle. Chrysanthemum was the answer. Her name is so long, said Joe. It scarcely fits on her name tag, said Rita, pointing. I'm named after my grandmother, said Victoria. And she's named after a flower. My name is long, said Miss Twinkle. It is, said Joe. My name would scarcely fit on a name tag, said Miss Twinkle. It would, said Rita, pointing. And, said Miss Twinkle, I'm named after a flower, too. You are, said Victoria. Yes, said Miss Twinkle. My name is Delphinium. Delphinium Twinkle. And if my baby is a girl, I'm considering Chrysanthemum as a name. I think it's absolutely perfect. Chrysanthemum could scarcely believe her ears. She blushed. She beamed. She bloomed. Chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum. Joe, Rita, and Victoria looked at Chrysanthemum longingly. Call me Marigold, said Joe. I'm Carnation, said Rita, pointing. My name is Lily of the Valley, said Victoria. Chrysanthemum did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She knew it. Overall, the class musical was a huge success. Chrysanthemum was absolutely perfect as a daisy. Victoria made the only mistake. She completely forgot her lines as the dainty fairy queen. Chrysanthemum thought it was wildly funny, and she giggled throughout the entire dance of the flowers. Eventually, Miss Twinkle gave birth to a healthy baby girl, and, of course, she named her Chrysanthemum. The end.
I love that story.
It's one of my favorite stories.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
One of our learning buddies, Rafa, had a question. He noticed that Chrysanthemum was having a conflict with her peers. We're wondering, how do you think Chrysanthemum could have handled that?
Well, I think she could have talked to him about how she felt and said that it was really upsetting to her because she liked her name and they should be respectful of her feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and if sometimes they just have to get a different perspective. It's really hard sometimes because what you know is the way you've been brought up and raised. And sometimes it's hard to see the other person's side of things. So
very true. It can happen even as adults too.
Very much
Yes.
so. Yep.
We've been talking a lot in our TV classroom about thinking about someone else's point of view and how to step into someone else's shoes to better understand how they're feeling.
Yes. It's really important to do that. I know it can be very hard at times, but definitely. And then you learn sometimes new things that you never knew before. So it's important to remember that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today.
It was great.
And great read aloud.
I love
answering
it.
some questions, letting us know all about how our police department supports our community.
Yes.
Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
And Tacoma, as we send you off today, the affirmation that we are going to say to build ourselves up, the positive things that we can say to ourselves is I matter. So practice saying that with me. I matter. Excellent job today. You are going to have art with Miss Teresa following this, so make sure that you gather your materials. You will need paper, any paper will do, pencil, crayons, and be ready to go. Thank you so much for being with us today. We look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow in our TV classroom.
Bye, Tacoma.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.
Welcome back to Art with Miss Teresa. I really appreciate you being here. Today we're going to be doing paper weaving. So we're going to need paper, a pencil, scissors, glue or a stapler with staples, things to color with, and such as crayons and markers. If you have magazines that are old and your grown-up says it's okay to use them to cut up, that could be really cool. this is going to be very unique just for you, but those are the things that we're going to do. We're going to start with something that looks like this. Okay. All right. So if you're ready to go, so am I. I'm going to take this one apart so that you can see how we did it. I have another piece of paper. And then with this one, I folded right down the middle and I made it into a half. So if you have a whole and you divide it in two, you have a half. And then I folded it again. So we're turning a half into a fourth. And so this gives us the lines that we're going to need to cut along. Okay, so you're going to need 2 sheets of paper. So I've got kind of this neat sea-themed paper that I found. So there's seahorses on here. And we're going to do the same thing to 2 sheets. So we're going to turn one whole into a half, and then we're going to turn that half into quarters, or 1/4. So 4 pieces. Okay. And it doesn't have to be perfect. That is okay. So now I can see where to cut along. I'm going to use grown-up scissors, but use the scissors that you have. And we're going to cut along the line. And try your best to stay on the line. Okay, so I have 4 pieces on this sheet. Okay, I'm going to move these aside, and then I'm going to do 4 pieces on this sheet. Go along the line. Make sure your fingers are out of the way. Okay, so I have 2 of that one, 3 and 4. Okay. So what I did was I stapled another sheet at the top of my strip, but only on one side, okay? And this is what it looks like when you do it. Okay. Now, if you want to glue just that side, that's great too, but it does take a while for glue to dry. So keep that in mind. Okay. So I'm going to take the strip that I did. I'm going to lift up the top one and put it under. Okay. And then I'm going to lift up number 3, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, and overlap it. Okay. And then this one, I'm going to bring it under number 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to go under number 2 and under number 4 and pull it across. And then you start over, where you lift number 1, go to number 3, and then we're going to overlap them. And now we have a new pattern. So you can, if you feel like your art is done at this point, you can take a stapler and staple along here so that it stays put. Or you can go ahead and glue it. Or you can wait till the very end and then glue everything down. But I like this pattern. It's kind of fun. Okay. So we're going to go to the next kind. And I'm still sticking with my mermaids because I think that they're delightful. Okay. So what we're going to do, for this one, you're going to need a pen or a pencil. You're going to need a pair of scissors. We're going to turn the whole paper in half. And I like to take my nail and put it along there just so that it's nice and straight. Okay. Okay, I'm going to flip it. So it's the side that you haven't colored. Okay. I'm going to take the ruler. I'm going to line it up to the paper. And I'm going to go ahead and use a marker because you're not going to see the back of this. Okay. So this is my line that we are going to cut to. We're not going to cut beyond this because if you do, it's not going to turn out right. Okay. So I'm going to take my ruler. I'm going to line it up to the edge. And then I'm going to put a line down, move it, put a line down, and keep on going. Now, if you don't have a ruler, you can use another piece of paper. It doesn't really matter if they're super even, but it's nice to make them nice and tight if it is even. Okay. And continue to go until you get to the very end. When I was a kid, I really liked making paper lanterns. So this pattern right here actually can do two different things. And I will show you. Okay. Keep on going all the way to the end. Okay.
Hey, Miss Teresa, I've got a question. Where can you buy that cool paper?
I got this at an arts and crafts store. There's a couple of them around. Michael's is kind of cool. Sometimes they're on sale. That's usually when I get it. Okay.
Neat. Thank you.
You're welcome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scissors and I am not going to cut this part. Okay. So we need to make sure that what we're cutting is right here at the fold. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to cut all the way to the line, but not beyond it. If you don't have any construction paper or scrapbooking paper at home, using any kind of material is actually pretty fun for this. You can use newspaper, you can use old wrapping paper, as long as you start off with a square or a rectangle. It works either way. So remember, a square has 4 even sides and a rectangle has 2 short sides and 2 long sides. Okay. Almost done. Okay, so when you open it up, it's going to kind of look like this. Okay, and when I said that I liked making paper lanterns when I was a kiddo, if you take the 2 sides long ways, and if you staple it, you get a lantern. Okay, but what we're going to do with it is we're going to interweave. Okay, So we're going to take another sheet. And if you had colored on your other sheet of paper, go ahead and flip it to the other side. I'm going to use a pen or a marker. You can use a pencil if you want to make sure it doesn't bleed through your paper. And I'm going to make strips, but I'm going to measure them with my ruler or another piece of paper. And it's okay if some of them are skinny and some of them are big. It just makes it more interesting. Can you think of anything that you've seen weaving in? Maybe it's your sweater, maybe it's a basket you have, maybe it's even a hat. I think it's a lot of fun to do this. Sometimes it's nice to just take a break and do something peaceful. Okay, so keep on going. Do you know how many inches there are in a ruler? There are 12 inches. And that makes a foot. Okay. So I'm going to cut along these lines. And take your time. I want you to be careful. And are there any things that you can think of to put in a basket? I like utilitarian art, and that word utilitarian means something that you can use. So I like baskets because they're pretty, but I can bring them to the store and collect all my stuff, or I can just put stuff in them. And you can weave with all sorts of material, but we're just practicing on paper. Okay, so we're almost done. And make sure that when you're cutting it's comfortable. If it doesn't feel right, try to adjust your hands. And if you need help from your grown-up in the house, go ahead and ask them. And it's okay to struggle with this. Okay, so since I have color on my paper, I'm going to flip it. I'm gonna take a piece. And since we didn't cut all the way across, it gives us a spot to start. So I'm gonna take this and we're going to skip every other one. Under, over, under, over. And you're just gonna keep on going. Sometimes it's easier to just to push along the strip. Okay, so we have one strip down. So this one, we're gonna wanna alternate, which means we're gonna do the exact opposite of what we just did. So we're gonna go under, over, and then you just keep on working through the pattern until your entire sheet is done. And then you start to see kind of a checkered pattern. Let's see. So what other things are checkered? Quilts, basic quilts anyway. Chessboards. When I lived in Germany, we were able to play chess if we got done with our work on time. And I always got done with my work on time so that I got to spend as much time playing chess as I could. And it's actually a really fun game. So we're going to keep on going. Now, you don't have to stick with just 2 sheets of paper. Like, you can cut up as many sheets as you want, and you can make it as colorful as you want to. So sometimes they get stuck on each other. Just be gentle with it. But each of your art projects are going to be just as unique as you are. Okay. So to make them fit a little bit tighter, you push. Push up, and you keep on going. So if your stuff is starting to move around a little too much, it would be a good idea to glue the back of the stuff that's on top and put it down. Glue that part, glue that part, glue that part, or you can use the stapler. So I don't have any glue right now, so I am going to use the stapler to keep it into place. And we're just going to keep on going. So right now I want you to think about who you want to give your art project to, and it's completely okay to just want to keep it to yourself. Maybe put it on your fridge or on top of a fireplace, or give it to a very special someone. And you can write letters on your paper that's with their name on it, maybe. It's always nice to get art projects. It means that somebody cared about you enough to make something nice. Okay? So we're going to go over and under. And some of my friends like to do knitting and crocheting, which is kind of making knots and patterns to make things like blankets or scarves or hats. And I think that's kind of cool. Those are also good things to get presents from, especially when it's cold outside. Okay. I think this is coming along nicely. And you don't have to worry about rushing. Take as much time as you need. Sometimes it's easier to pop it up from the bottom. Or you could even start over here, and then when you're done with it, you can shimmy it upwards. And that word, I'll show you what that word means in just a minute. So, okay. So you're going to kind of move it gently upwards, and that's kind of shimmying it. Okay, so I'm almost done with mine, but I would really, really like to see a picture of what you guys did. If you can send it to the email address down below, it would totally make my day to see what kind of arts and crafts things that you guys came up with. Okay, so I am almost done with mine. So I find it very peaceful to do things like this, especially with my hands. And have you thought about who you'd like to give this to? If you need help writing out your words, asking your grown-up is pretty awesome. If you don't have glue or stapler, or a stapler and staples, tape is pretty awesome. So we're going to shimmy this back up. I think that's a fun word. Okay. So we're going to go one more. And I think I'm going to be done with mine. At this point, I'm pretty sure you're a pro at this. Maybe you can teach your grown-up how to do this too. And any paper that you're done using, that you can either put it away for another art project, or you can put it in a recycling bin. Okay. The last one tends to be a little bit tighter, so take your time. Sometimes I like to get my stuff at the dollar store. Sometimes I see it on sale at a grocery store. Or sometimes I just use recycle bits. But you don't have to stick with just paper. You can use yarn, you can use string, you can use all sorts of textures, and they can mix and match. So kind of looks like a rug, which is also woven. And there you are. If you want to make sure that they stay in place, because we also have the back side going. So those are my art projects for the day. We want to make sure that we get to finish this one. So we're going to go under, over, under, and over. So thank you again for joining me today. I really, really have a lot of fun doing this. Please continue to create, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Hey kids, we want to see your work. Just send your pictures and your stories to TV Classroom, 601 South 8th Street, Tacoma, Washington, 98405.